It's time to get some morning chores done here at my Illinois home. As you've known before, we heat with wood down here too, so I like to keep a nice supply of wood. I like to be 2 or 3 years ahead, so that especially as I get older, if I have an injury or something happens, I have some reserve. See, this quite a bit here that needs to be processed. This big pile here is a little bit on the right. There is some oak, but the rest of it is slippery elm, or we call it red elm. One of my favorite firewoods here in Illinois. Burns nice and clean, doesn't leave any ash, and puts out a lot of heat. One thing I'm up to today is I picked up a roadkill deer last night, and we feed a lot of birds, and one thing I like to feed, I like to feed the hawks and eagles too. So way out in this field out here, I'm gonna haul this deer carcass out, and I'm gonna set it up for the eagles, because I put it in just such a spot that as I sit next to my wood stove, I can look out and I can observe the eagles feeding. There's a lot of happenings from the cabin that took place long before I started doing these YouTube videos, but as I go through some of my old slides, I come across some pictures. And ones I come across were when I built the woodshed up at the cabin. Now, it's a pretty nice woodshed, and I shot some clips and kind of explained what was going on, and I'll feed in the old slides that show the actual scene. Kind of like to have a woodshed like that here at home, but I've never bothered. I always just scavenge old tin sheets, and as I stack my wood, I cover it. Kind of a movable woodshed it is. The system I've used has worked pretty well. Oftentimes I do that crisscross stacking for the ends, and it holds the wood up enough that I can go up to 6 feet high without it splitting apart, spreading, and falling over. When I get up higher, I have some timbers in the ground to help. This has been my system for close to 40 years. I get a lot of comments, and a lot of people ask if my wife ever goes to the cabin. And she used to go up there, and we used to have a different place up there that was a little more civilized. She enjoyed going up to, but she tried the cabin and just doesn't care for it. But I don't know why. The last time that she was up, I had just gotten rid of the old outhouse. It kind of sat outside the window, and I looked south. And I didn't like it being there, so one day I threw some Coleman fuel on it, threw a match in there, and just yelled, "Fire in the hole!" Before we go on, I better explain that light in the outhouse. That was a gag. I got home from a trip one time, and I was kidding my partner Jim about it. Hey, we should go back. And he said, well, give me an excuse. And I said, I think I left the light on in the outhouse. Well, we had no power up there, so that was a big joke. But the following year, I had a generator up there when I was putting a new metal roof on the cabin for doing some cutting and some drilling. So I ran an extension cord out there, hung the light bulb, turned the light on in there, took the picture, and of course when I got home I sent it to him and said, see, I knew I left that light on in the outhouse. And yes, Illinois grows some big bucks. And it wasn't very long and the old tar paper shack outhouse was burned up. So I went over a ways out from the cabin and I put up this nice outdoor privy. Nice view, nothing to block your view of the outer doors. But somehow when it was way below zero, that just wasn't very appealing to go out and use that. that's what was there the last time she was there. She braved through it very fine. She's chosen not to come back, even though now we've put up this really nice outhouse. We have some more amenities around. One reason I got these old shots out was because I knew that as she stood there by the cabin, it showed how we used to store our wood. So it was the start of the woodshed story. Why I finally broke down and put in the effort to put up a good woodshed to keep the wood dry. In the early days of having our cabin, we always just had wood piles sitting around, and we didn't always have a cover for them, so a lot of times it'd be raining on it, it'd be snow covered, you'd be knocking the ice and snow off. So it was always the dream was to have something to put our wood in, a woodshed. So one year I started devising a plan, and the year before I'd gotten in trouble. I was trying to dig the hole for the new outhouse, and the frost was in the ground in June, and I couldn't dig down deep enough. So one fall I thought ahead, and I went out and got some tamarack trees. I cut them down and got some nice long timbers, and so I put the post in the ground, and I had this plan of a outhouse that I put the poles so it'd be about 8 by 15 feet or something like that, and then I figured I'll just go from there later on. So then as the plan come together, I had a friend that he had this virtual kind of a windbreak wall that was on his farm, and it kind of blown over somewhat, and the windbreak was there so the cows could get behind it in the bad times. And anyway, he didn't have any cattle anymore, and so I salvaged the corrugated tin off that, and I brought that in on sleds, I brought it on wheelbarrows, because it was quite a trek in through the mud and everything else in the wheelbarrow, but I hauled a lot of tin in, and when I measured out the tin, I knew I could get a little bigger on the woodshed. So when I put the poles in, I did like this, and I kind of used a little extension on top. The poles were there, but I kind of ran them across the top, and I don't know what you want to call it, but it made it so I could get the shed a little bigger. Ended up being more like 22 by 12 when I got all done. But I'm glad I did, because it was a lot more space. But to make in the building process, I got the framework up like that. Then when it came time to put the tin on top, I cut I had the tops of those tamarack trees, and they were long and narrow, so I just laid them across the top in a grid pattern, and I had a string on a level so I could kind of make it somewhat proper. But I just kept bringing stuff in, and I'd bring it in like this with a wheelbarrow. And then as things went on, I just kept cutting more wood, and then pretty soon I wanted some workbenches and stuff. I wanted those workbenches, so I had more tamarack, and I put some posts in the ground and dug down with the auger and put the post in again, and then cut those big huge planks out of some more of the tamarack. trees. They're about 3 inches thick, so it made a real nice workbench. And pretty soon I ended up with, I had enough room for my workbench and had the woodshed on one side and plenty of storage over here on the other to come out here and work. And I kind of store my solar panels under there to keep them out of any tree damage when I'm gone. When the project was finished up, I had a nice big area for the firewood, and I didn't need all that space really, so I kind of divided it down the middle and put some poles up and down, and then I'll put all the wood in one year on one side of the aisle, and then the next year's wood will be on the other side of the aisle. And then there's even partitions in there that one half is balsam and one half is aspen. That worked out as a real nice way to have a 2 to 3 year supply of nice, dry, seasoned firewood. Not really much of a workshop, but it sure is nice to have a place to come out of the weather and work. And I keep some basic tools out here, and as with any place, you start accumulating and accumulating, and you need more all the time. So I've been putting those windows in the cabin, and they came with screens, and so I store the screens up there for when I want them. And you never know when you might have a pair of skis break down, so I keep a spare set back here with some spare shoes to fit them over in the other storage.